always, from the heart of the city, and now on demand 24/7 on the CHFI website. This is the soundtrack to accompany the dark. And I'm Don Jackson, around the world on the internet. Because of light pollution, say Italian and U.S. researchers, 2/3 of the people in the world and 99% of the people in the continental United States and Europe never see a truly dark, starry sky. Unquote. An excerpt from Astronomy magazine and the social studies column of a past issue of the Globe and Mail. This was from a review in Canadian Geographic of Christopher Dewdney's Acquainted with the Night, published by HarperCollins, and I quote, "Light pollution has increased by about 10% a year in the past 30 years, to the point where the urban night is essentially just a dilution of the day. Not only has this banished the stars and played havoc with the ecology of night creatures, it also seems to have affected human health." Unquote. This hour, The Dark, with Lovers and Other Strangers, from iTunes and CHFI.com. Avril Lavigne, and I'm With You, and Randy Crawford with Eric Clapton and David Sanborn, Knockin' on Heaven's Door. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers, from iTunes and CHFI.com. The authors of Facts and Fallacies wrote, "Today it is probably difficult for most of us to imagine what life was like before the introduction of streetlights. Most people stayed indoors after dark. Indeed, so dangerous was the darkness that the Roman writer Juvenal warned that it was careless in the extreme to go out for supper at night without having first made a will." Unquote. In some places, it still is dangerous to be out after dark, but not where we're going tonight. With Lovers and Other Strangers, from iTunes and CHFI.com. Benny King and Stand By Me, and Sarah McLachlan with Blackbird. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers, from iTunes and CHFI.com. Psychiatrist Dr. Glenn Wilson in the Daily Mail in 2003 wrote, and I quote, "There's good reason to believe that people's personalities do change around the time of the full moon, not because of any astronomical force, but because it creates the optimum lighting conditions for feeling carefree and mischievous. The light is dim enough to hide blemishes and reduce inhibitions, but not so dark that we fumble and stumble." Unquote. Anna Quindlen in the New York Times wrote, "I took long walks at night along the beach, composing bad blank verse and searching endlessly for someone wonderful who would step out of the darkness and change my life. It never crossed my mind that that person could be me." Anna Quindlen in the New York Times. Discoveries in the Dark, for Lovers and Other Strangers, from iTunes and CHFI.com. Linda Ronstadt, Blue Bayou, Stephen Bishop, On and On, Paul McCartney, Every Night, and Boyz II Men, in the Still of the Night. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers, from iTunes and CHFI.com. Mabel Drew, in the Whig Standard magazine that was published in Kingston, Ontario, said that she was ashamed of being afraid of the dark. If she had taken the trouble to find out that others had the same fear, maybe they could have conquered it together. She recounted one story that gives us all hope that fears can be overcome as long as we have someone to lend a helping hand. And I quote, "I remember a story told by an elderly Quaker woman, Sister Elliot, about a little boy who, on being sent by his parents to bed, stood at the foot of the stairs looking up into the ominous shadows. His sister, only a year older than he, took him by the hand and began to draw him towards that upper darkness. 'Let's be afraid together,' she said. And suddenly he felt brave and able to go on." Unquote. Mabel Drew, in the Whig Standard magazine, published in Kingston. Maurice Freehill wrote, "Who is more foolish, the child afraid of the dark, or the man afraid of the light?" I'm Don Jackson. This is CHFI.com. Phil Collins, "In the Air Tonight," and "Lights to Drive My Soul." I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Darkness devours every shining day. Darkness demands and always has its way. Darkness listens, watches, waits. Darkness claims the day and celebrates. Sometimes in silence, darkness comes. Sometimes with a gleeful banging of drums. An excerpt from the Book of Counted Sorrows, quotes from which are featured in many Dean Koontz novels published by Berkeley. Meister Eckhart, and quoted in a collection called First Aid for the Soul, published in 1998 by Peter Popper Press, said, "Truly, it is in the darkness that one finds the light. So when we are in sorrow, then this light is nearest of all to us." Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Starbuck and Moonlight Feels Right. The Beatles with Norwegian Wood and Eric Clapton and Change the World. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Finally, this hour, Chet Ramo in the Boston Globe wrote, "There is no optical phenomena visible at dawn that cannot also be seen at sunset. But our eyes are more completely rested in the morning and adapted to darkness. And so we are more sensitive to tints and hues. There is something else, a psychological sense of waking up in a technicolor Oz. We see things with the wide eyes of morning that we'd be oblivious to at the end of the day. The tiny white moth, for example, perched on a blade of grass, spreading its wings to the east in anticipation of the rising sun." Unquote. Chet Ramo in the Boston Globe. Light always follows the dark. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Good night, sweet dreams. I'm Don Jackson.